Do you know your constitutional rights? Our founding fathers died to give every American citizen freedom of speech, due process, freedom of assembly, and the freedom to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. Rise, stand tall, be bold, and be grateful for your American heritage. This is the land of the free and the home of the brave, where everything is possible. And we are the people. Welcome back to the show. Today we have President of Project Sentinel and the London Center for Policy Research, retired Senior Intelligence Operative and retired Army Colonel, Anthony Shaffer. Welcome back.
Hey, great to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Yeah, it's awesome to have you back on the show. I know we talked in the past and you've been doing great things. So what's currently on your desk today?
So right now we're launching, as you mentioned, Project Sentinel. Sentinel is a project that's focused on the founding principles of the nation, many of which are based on religious beliefs relating to God. And George Washington actually picked his 13-star banner because if you've seen it, it's 13 stars with the blue background. It's at the American, at the prominent at the history, the Revolutionary War Museum in Philadelphia. And basically, it was the 13 stars that kind of represented the colonies, but more importantly, Washington said it represented a new constellation under God, essentially. And the founding fathers found it very important to reflect their views of governance based on their religious beliefs. Many of men were of the cloth. So we believe that returning to the basic principles of the founding of this nation are very important for helping us establish an understanding of the Constitution, and more importantly, helping to shape the way we support the Republic going forward. So that's what Project Sentinel is, focuses on the Bill of Rights, on the issues that were most important to those who found the country, and we want to honor that by going forward with their principles as our primary driver of good governance. So
wow, that's awesome. Amen. I'll definitely take a look at that.
Thank you.
That's good that you're working on these things. You know, I think it's important to bring that back so people can appreciate our history, which was founded on our Judeo-Christian values. And
right, absolutely.
Yeah, and all of our founding fathers were God inspired, and they were inspired by biblical teaching. So I think it's definitely fantastic that you're doing that.
And yeah, and on that point, if you don't mind me adding, the separation of church and state, it's not what the left makes it out to be. It's not having a government that's bereft of religion. It's making sure that the government cannot influence or prevent religion, which is what the left is actually trying to do. So whenever you see them saying, oh, separation of church and state, it's like, yeah, they wanted to separate you all from being able to influence religion by denying its existence and trying to undermine it. So that's what the real religious separation is, not what the left says. The government's job was to protect religion based on the fact that many of the principles that were imbued in the governance actually are based on principles of Christianity. So
yes, there's definitely a big distinction there. So
there is a huge one, yes.
For pointing that out, yeah, we're seeing a lot with the godless left and certain key players there who just hate God, want to take God out of the Constitution, want to take God out of our schools, want to take God out of our culture and our society, and they're offended by God. And I'm never one to care about those things because I represent God here. I'm a servant on earth. So this is a good opening. And, you know, with that, I brought you on today, Tony, to talk about the elections, right? So we just had our midterms elections. And also Donald Trump announced his bid for presidency for 2024. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's get into the election. So what about some of the key states? Let's start with Pennsylvania. Look what happened in Pennsylvania. What is your opinion? And where's Pennsylvania headed now under this new governor?
Yeah, look, for your audience to understand, they can Google this. I've testified in front of the Pennsylvania legislature at least 7 times. At least 3 of those were in the open. And I've had consultations with your legislature there in Pennsylvania on all these issues. And I think whatever I said was pretty much ignored, basically, because they've continued to do things which I think undermine legitimate voting choice. I don't want to go so far as say there was cheating, but it sure appears to me that the urban centers and the votes of the people in urban centers were far more had far more weight than those in the rural, more Republican areas. And I'm disappointed that Shapiro was elected. I think he represents the worst principles of governance. I think the people of Pennsylvania are going to regret that. John Fetterman, look, Oz was a, a troubled and imperfect candidate, but I cannot believe they've elected someone who has obvious incapacity to do the job he's been elected to do. And just in general, I remain flabbergasted that Philadelphia would elect Democrats again when they've become one of the most violent cities in the
Yeah.
United States. Things like
Yeah.
that, I don't understand how people vote against their own interests. It just
But this is
baffles me.
it, Tony, that this is why, because it's covered up, right? So
Yeah,
they're basically the poster child for the criminal or the underdog and the immigrants and the people of color. But that's how they also keep the people victimized, right?
right,
Vote for us, will help you, then we don't do anything, and then it's a generational,
exactly,
if you will,
right.
right?
That was done at the national level with Biden and
Yeah.
the so-called relief, college loan relief. I mean,
Right.
it's unconstitutional unless the only way that this should be done is like he basically gives everybody a break of $10,000 or nobody gets it. There's no, you cannot fairly distribute, especially by executive fiat, ten to $20,000 per person for these loans. It was never going to fly. They knew it. They lied. They put it out there just for time, just enough time to get the votes from the youth, lying to them, and then now it's never going to happen. Just saying. Your point
Yeah,
was
and
very well
I
articulated.
know someone who's personally affected by that, who did vote for that, and now they didn't get it. And if you think about it, our national debt is 127% of GDP. So our
Right.
GDP is 23 trillion. Just so people know, and I repeat this quite often, our debt is 28 trillion, and a lot of those trillions of dollars got spent with the 3 rounds of COVID stimulus relief, the climate change package for I think it was 2 trillion. So again, we don't have the money. Just keep that in
No.
mind when you're voting. If somebody promises you something, who's paying for it? We don't have the money. And now all of our money is going towards the 80,000 IRS new agents. But I'm sure
Yeah.
that's another topic for another show.
Well, another topic I'd like to bring up for another show too, in particular, we could probably break down is the whole issue of tax. At this point, not since I think 5, 6 generations has there been any link between appropriations of money by Congress and actual spending, because and your taxes. There's no link. Your taxes are essentially harassment by the IRS because the government just prints money. There's no link between what you pay
Right.
in and what they actually spend. It's to me bankrupting, as you point out, the entire nation. And our kids, our children will have massive debt set upon them by us. And I've apologized to my kids a number of times saying, I'm sorry, my generation has saddled on you this immense debt. So we should talk about that again. We have some ideas as Project Sentinel how we want to go about combating this because it has to be dealt with. And secondly, climate change. Look, I've got a degree in environmental studies. Let me tell you, your audience may already understand this. We're in no danger of losing the
Right.
planet for at least a million years. Just
Not
saying.
anytime soon. We're okay for now.
Yeah, and anybody who wants to study this and understand it has to study something called geologic time. Geologic time is that which we have come to understand actually represents climate change. Climate change takes centuries. And right now, believe it or not, despite all the climate hysteria, we are now on actually a cooling trend that started a number of years ago and will go on until we reach another ice age in about, I don't know, 10,000 years. But the sun is the most important single point which controls our climate.
Right.
And again, so unless we come up with technologies that actually affects the sun, which maybe we will in about 10,000 years, we are now on an overall net cooling phase for the planet, which means over the next 2,000 years, you're going to see gradual cooling and expansion of glaciers. So all this hoopla and panic, it's completely unwarranted. And all the spending they're doing will have absolutely zero impact on anything regarding climate. It's all a fraud, period.
Yeah, and we spent a lot of money on that, about 2 trillion. And again, this is another thing that appeals to voters. To me,
It
God's in
does.
control. I'm not concerned because I know God's in control. And I don't think that this climate thing is such an issue, such an urgent issue, especially when
It's
we
not.
have high crime rates rising in all of our cities, all these other things going on with our schools and our children, 40-year high inflation, and it just kind of covers up the economic woes of this administration.
Right.
So, that's kind of what it is. And we can definitely talk more to economics because I think people need to wake up before they vote. To me, it's a tragedy that Fetterman was actually elected, and I'm not even referring to his incapacity. That's one way to evaluate it. But even just his radical policies of just letting people out of jail and being a spendthrift and just everything from abortion to parental rights. So, that being said, let's talk about some of the other states. What about
Sure.
Arizona, New Jersey? Do you have a take on those? What could be the future of these
So
states?
let's start with New Jersey. I actually endorsed a candidate for office in New Jersey. He didn't win, unfortunately. I was just exchanging email with his campaign. I think New Jersey is another state that has real potential because I think people outside the large urban areas are fed up. And I think you're going to see a continued kind of walk back against some of the more extreme policies. Arizona is another basket case because the Republican Party there did not understand how to manage and mitigate the voting season. I do agree with President Trump. I think we have a voting day. If you can't vote on that day, you can state your reasons why you can't and get a ballot to fill in and do. But I think leaving it open for people to kind of go out and continue to harvest votes, which I would argue they're doing. Anytime you have an open-ended election past election day, the results are pretty obvious what happens. Just saying. And the only state I've seen that the Republican Party got a handle on that is California, where basically they fought fire with fire. A lot of these districts where the Republicans are probably going to put, I think they already have put the House over the top for Republican control, were because Republicans figured out in some of these communities, we've got to go out and do the ballot harvesting legally, just like the Democrats do. And that's why you've seen good results in California, good results in New York, but not so much in New Jersey and not so much in Arizona. It's a real mixed bag at this point.
Wow. Yeah, and I just sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming. And I'll just say, as a Christian living, in the United States, I feel what's the word, challenged, and I knew the walk would never be easy when Jesus calls someone and he says, but take heart, I have overcome the world. So, let not your heart be
Hmm.
troubled. But I think our hearts are kind of troubled because when you have all these things going on, one of the things that really bothered me during this election was, just the teaching of that there's three genders in school, right? And kind of coming back to what you said, I mean, a lot of these people who won and who are now holding the Senate seats or the governor seats are endorsing this theory, right? The
Right,
transgenderism, and parents don't really have any rights. So we're basically having child pornography in schools at this point. I mean, what's
right.
your opinion on that?
So I've just been appointed to the local library trust here in Chowan County, where I live in North Carolina, and I do not believe in censorship of books. With that said, I do believe there's age appropriate restrictions that have to be enforced. Should adults want to look at that stuff? Go knock yourself out. I don't care. As a matter of fact, the library here locally has an adult only section where they have it kind of away from the kids section, which is the way it should be. I don't believe in restrictions of speech for adults, but for children, it's completely different. And I'm sorry, anything done to a child surgically regarding genital mutilization is illegal. A child should not be surgically altered in any way until they are of the age of majority, which is 18 or older. My experience tells me that kids don't understand who they are until they're, well into their teens. And the idea that you can know that you're born in the wrong body or this, that, and the other, I think is propaganda. My son is 16. He goes to the local high school, and he says that the in thing is to be gay. It's like what? But that's the cultural pressure that, oh, everybody's doing it. That's insane. And the idea then you would take that and push that over to saying, oh, if you want to be a girl, that's okay. Kids don't understand the ramifications of these really bad decisions, and there's a large effort right now of folks who went through that process to push back on it, which, by the way, the left is trying to suppress. The LGBTQ community is trying to suppress this whole buyer's remorse thing that a number of folks who've gone through that process are now saying. And to be fair, parents should have total control of their child's life. That is everything from what they see in school regarding not having woke taught to them, the basic tools necessary to survive in the nation: reading, writing, arithmetic, home equity, home skills relating to how you manage budgets, technical skills like how you work with wood, uh, higher skills relating to philosophy and history that is taught based on fact, not on emotion. These are the things that should be in our schools, not this whole rewriting of history books and trying to make people feel a certain way so that they become a certain gender that's
Yeah,
different than who they are. And so that's got to be stopped. And again, I feel very strongly about stopping any authorization of the so-called gender affirming surgery. That's code word for Dr. Mingeli level restructuring of the body, and I do
yeah. I
not
mean,
support it.
it's rewriting the Bible,
That's that is.
and you're basically transferring the insecurities of your own self and your own filth on these children,
You
just
are
because that it's kind of, and I read something somewhere that said these people are inherently, and I'm sure I'm going to offend people, but that's fine. Hey, this is my show. Don't watch the show, right? But the people are basically insecure, and that's why they say, well, we're coming out of the closet. That's why they have to go and announce it to the world. I don't wake up every day and announce to the world that, hey, I'm a woman. I know I'm a woman. What if someone comes up to me and say, well, hey, you're a man? I'm not going to vigorously fight with them. I'll just probably
right.
just turn the other cheek. But they don't do that. That's because inherently they're insecure, right? And they don't know, they're lost. So they need to be saved, not pump their insecurity and their sin on the next generation. And even the colors, this was talked about at church. You think about their color should actually be black. It should be darkness because it's demonic. It's not bright and colorful, and how they have the whole panorama of colors. I think that's a false representation. Anyway, that's just my opinion. But this is one of the issues on at the election time. And again, I think many people are disturbed that these people won, right? And my question for you is, how are people voting for all of this nonsense? Because I know we live in a fallen world, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, some of these things are just so obvious. How do half of the people in the country get it and the other half don't? Who are these people who are voting for such obnoxious things on the ballot?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So let me break it down a little bit. First off, those who do vote for the left are being lied to. And let me go through a couple of the lies. They
Sorry,
always
by
talk
who
about
though? By who are they being lied to? Yeah,
by their own party. I have a number of friends, close friends, who have left the Democrat Party,
right,
who basically felt that the overall theme of the left, saying, "Oh, we want to help the disenfranchised. We want to make sure everybody gets to vote." It's all of their rhetoric that's all based on emotion and light on fact, which actually kind of draws people in. And I would call them the low information voter. A lot of folks
right,
don't actually think it through. A lot of friends of mine have become awakened, not woke, to the fact that many of the things the left says they don't mean. They say it to try to get people to come into their tent, and then once they're in their tent, they're abused. And no further do we have to look than what you mentioned earlier: inflation. The left has gone about trying to dismantle the energy production capacity of this nation at the detriment of those they say they want to help the most. The people who have been most affected by high gas prices and high inflation is the disadvantaged, the minorities
right.
that cannot afford
Immigrants, right,
7%. No, right. So even if you look at that, and to your point, it's like, well, why do they keep voting for it? Because they become essentially prisoners of the system.
right.
They somehow believe that we, the conservatives, are the ones causing us because they're always told we're the evil ones, and they don't actually take the time to investigate and actually think about what's best for them. And I think this is changing, though. I think a number of minority communities, especially this Hispanic community, big
Yes,
time, is
yes.
recognizing, like, yeah, this is not true.
There's something wrong. It doesn't add up. Yeah,
Something's wrong. And like Miami-Dade, I spent a lot of time down in Miami and that area back during the Cold War running operations. That place becoming red it should be a wake-up call, because most people recognize, yeah, we're being lied to by the left. All these things they say, or these platitudes, they're not real. So I think that's part of the problem. The next part of the problem is the fact that the left is very effective in building narratives. You mentioned climate change. Oh, don't you want to be part of saving the planet? How can you not be concerned
You'll be left
about?
behind.
Yeah, I mean, it's all this like stuff to scare you or make you feel bad. Oh, don't you feel bad about driving a gas guzzler? It's like, no, not really.
Really.
Don't you want to drive an electric car? It's all cheaper. It's not cheaper, by the way, and it's more destructive to the environment. Just saying, if you take the time, we ought to talk about environmental issues another show.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, they're very effective in creating this guilt
Right.
centric narrative. Like, don't you want to this? And oh
That's
my
interesting.
goodness,
Yeah.
and build back better. Oh, we want to build back better. Oh, I don't want them to touch anything. I'm pretty happy with the
They
things are,
messed
but
up the whole economy that he built and they built back worse. So I'm not sure what they built, but hopefully we have another shot in 2024. And we're
right.
going to talk about that because I know Donald Trump made his announcement. But I just want to comment on what you said. What my response to this is cognitive dissonance, right? So it's kind of like people who smoke, and I'm not judging anyone who smokes, but if you know it's bad for you and you do it
Right.
anyway, right? So it's one of those things, and that's what it is. It's cognitive dissonance for the left. They almost, it's like they're harming themselves kind of willingly. At some point you got to wake up and realize that, right? Because they do create a state of perpetual victimhood
They do.
generationally, and if you don't pick up on that, then either you're blinded or ignorant, but I think they kind of do. And the feeling that they have in their heart, like you said, is that, well, it's a lesser of two evils. Well, the conservative party is racist, right? But that being said, that's also changing because you have a huge Hispanic voter base that is now right. We do have some South Asians coming through. We have Asians, and of
Mhm.
course we have the Black people as well. There was a lot of there was a huge Black voice for Trump and just Republicans in general.
Right.
So, this trend is changing, and of course I want to talk about that a little bit. The future of America. What does it look like? But what is your view on the 2024 elections? Who do you think is going to run against Trump in terms of the left? Do you think it's going to be Biden? And what's your take on that?
Well, let me close out this one thing before we go, because I agree with everything you just said on that. It's the soft bigotry of low expectations the left has made their mantra. We People are just not smart enough. We got to help them. That's what they say to people, and it's like it's racist. It's
So
pure
it's victim
racism
again. It's being a victim.
repackaged.
So let us help
I
you
know.
out. Rely on us.
So I can tell you that the candidate who most best reflects that is going to be the
Ah,
victimhood provider in chief,
the savior of the
the
world.
savior.
It's not
Exactly.
Jesus
So
Christ. It's going to be the devil.
so so they're going to go with Biden. I do believe that they are that lazy, because Biden's become the savior in chief. Every If you just look at I was looking at some stuff from the White House today. They were touting all of these great things from this infrastructure bill they did. Not a thing has happened from that. All the money that in that bill, and the one that Podesta got the money from for climate change, that's all going to pay off their cronies across the board who helped them get elected. That's where all that money goes. That's why we never see great infrastructure built back. It goes to the coffers of Democrat apparatchiks and businesses all up and down the line. It's payoff for their support. And I think that's something that I hope Congress, once they get back in, investigates where all this money's going, where all the money's going in Ukraine. It's all these unlimited, open-ended checks that go to all these causes, and that's what we have to fight on the conservative side, because they enrich via our tax dollars those who support them politically. It's atrocious, and so Joe Biden, being the savior in chief, is going to continue to do that, and I think they're going to make all these other the fake promises work for this election. One thing I've noticed about the Democrats, they're not creative, but they're persistent, and they're going to do the same thing again. They're going to go for victimhood. They're going to go for the separation of us and them. You and I are going to be a them. It's them. It's not us. We're doing everything we can to help you. It's them. It's their fault. And they're going to continue to put that out. They're going to try to demonize Trump and anyone who supports him because, he's a racist. Uh, and all these things are going to be their playbook, and nobody plays it better than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is just essentially at this point a shell. I think he's willing to do and say anything he's told to say, which is tragic. I have testified before Senator Biden. I've run into him a couple times when I was in the Excella Lounge up in New York. We used to take the train back, and I run into him. But the man I met and spoke to is not the man who's now sits in the White House. And I think they find that a convenient tool to use for purposes of reelection. So I do believe they're going to push Biden. I believe they're going to go with the same playbook that's worked before. And that's why we've got to get smarter and get ahead of it this coming cycle. So,
Yeah, yeah. And another issue just to add to your list is abortion. We're going to use that.
oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, so I want to be clear on this. I think a number of states have moved in the direction that their constituents want. This is the thing about, the republic. There was never any constitutional right or constitutional basis for the federal government to get involved in that issue, period. There was no legal standing. So I do believe the overturning of Wade was the correct thing. It's been returned to the states. I'm a big believer. Project Sentinel is a big focus of the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment basically says those things which are not specifically stipulated to the federal government for them to have dominance of goes to the states. And
right.
so this is
Yeah.
one of those things that the federal government should never have been involved in this issue. There's dozens of other issues they should not be involved in. So it's been rightfully returned to the states for the people. For
Yeah. Well,
the left always talks about, oh, democracy. No, 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 they don't mean that. They mean the democracy they tell you to have, not the one that the people need to have regarding the debate discussion of this
America
issue.
is a republic, not a democracy, right?
And that's the other thing. Thank you. It drives me nuts every time I see one of these knuckleheads up there. Oh, we're saving democracy. It's like we don't have a democracy. And I look forward to being hopefully on CNN sometime where I can call these folks out and just say it's like I have no idea what you're talking about. We have had a republic for over 240 years, and I think that's what we still have. So
Yeah, and just so coming back to what you said, you kind of touched on the Ukraine war a little bit and all the money we're sending abroad now. I know you're a rock star from the army. I don't know too much about the military aspect of things, but I do know from an economic perspective that we can't afford this.
right,
We can't afford this, and we're printing money, and that's leading into a disaster. That's why we have inflation. And we
right,
also can talk about how the Fed's messed up so badly. We had 0% interest rates during the pandemic, and now they had to quickly taper them up. I guess three or four, well, actually 5 times within the span of about 6 months, and that sends shockwaves to the economy, and that's why we have
right,
inflation, right? It's not
right,
because of the pandemic, just to be clear. So Biden can use that excuse, but we have to look at things for what they actually are. And coming back to Trump, you can't really argue with the results of his economy. You might not like him personally. So, I encourage people to really think about this when they vote. Just think about his economy, the trade
right,
agreements that he canceled. He restructured NAFTA, all these unfair practices where people had tariffs on our products, but we didn't have tariffs on theirs. That was the example of NAFTA with Canada and Mexico.
right.
But again, you really want to go back and look at where we were and where we are today and just subtract the pandemic out because it's not because of the pandemic. Would you agree?
I do. So I was actually on the campaign, and one of my colleagues was Steve Moore, one of President Trump's economic advisors. President Trump made the conscious policy decision to tie our national security to economy. So Steve Moore and I were on often on shows like this and others talking about what their plans are for the economic success. And I remember one time he briefed me, he says, Tony, we're looking at probably 4% growth. I said, you're kidding me. It's like, no, 4% growth is coming. Mark my words. Sure enough, he was right. So they had a plan for essentially releasing the pent up energy within the American economy, just releasing it, removing all sorts of unneeded and I would say not only unhelpful regulations and restrictions which penalize American businesses from being successful. Those were removed. He went about trying to do some tariffs on China, which is very controversial regarding steel. I was like, no, I think it's the right thing to do. A lot of other folks were critical, even on the conservative side. I said, no, it's the right thing to do. And I think overall, within the time he had, he made immense progress in creating economic conditions that benefited all Americans.
All right. Well, you have about a minute left. So is there any quick
Okay.
closing you'd like to say, Colonel Anthony Shaffer?
No, I thank you for this opportunity to kind of break this all down. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of help educate people on these important issues. And I appreciate you've always got great questions. I really would like to come back and talk more about the economic issues relating to what we need to do with China and some other issues, as well as break down the whole climate fraud thing, because I don't think people understand what a complete and utter fraud, global fraud that is, and how much money is wasted on things that will have no impact on anything regarding our lifetime or anything regarding the environment. But thank you again for having me on with you today.
Very, very well said. Well, thank you again. And viewers, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube so you can catch us again next time. God bless you.